Good morning, Mayor Adler.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for inviting me.
Well, we're so glad to have you. This has nothing to do with current events, Mayor Adler, but I would like to know your take on what happened with the big snowstorm. Austin really suffered, and I recently moved to Manor, and frankly, I was so glad. We did.
It's a hard deal. I mean, the storm was much greater than obviously anybody had anticipated. Our state system that is deregulated and just incents the lowest possible energy rates around the state for all the independent providers that are providing energy, built in no incentives for anybody actually to harden their system. Austin's generation was able to perform and outperform the state by like 50%, but we don't get to keep any of our energy. Our generation goes into the state grid, and then we get allocated a certain amount. The problem we had here locally is that we don't have our grids broken up enough, our circuits broken up enough, so that we can actually keep on the things that are critical and then rotate usage around the city. And they're fixing that now. But that was our biggest learned moment.
Well, and it just sounded like it'd been neglected and ignored for way too long, and it needed to be corrected, updated, certainly brought into the 21st century.
And the scary thing is that people don't really talk about that much is that the statewide grid was within minutes of actually going down. And if it had gone down, we're 6 weeks without power to be able to start it back up again. I mean, we were that close statewide to cataclysmic issue statewide. That would have been virtually no power statewide.
Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering that there were reports this week that we could see as bad or worse this summer. I mean, do you know anything more about that? That, I mean, because I guess they were, telling us to cut back a couple of days ago because they had plants off land preparing for the summer, and now they're saying, it could get really bad when it gets hot.
I have asked that question repeatedly since
sure.
before, and have been told no. That the systems can adjust for that, and then the announcement came out last week. So I have redoubled and quadrupled my questioning. That warning went away really quickly, but just the fact that it issued is frightening. Obviously, the state grid system right now is it was set up with an entirely different priority system. It was set up to maximize low value power. And when you set up a system that is maximizing low value power, in all things, you get what you pay for. And the system is operating perfectly for what it was designed to do. It's just not the system we need. And that's what the state legislator has got to do more than the cosmetic stuff that it's doing right now.
I certainly hope so. Now, living in Manor, now I am in a cooperative called Blue Bonnet, and we had no real problems. They did a rolling blackout, I guess you call it,
right?
And we just didn't know if
we should be able to do that in Austin and can't. And the reason for that is that there are some institutions and places we can't turn off, police stations, hospitals, but they're not the only things that are on their circuits. So there's more. The circuits are bigger than just them. So when we get a small amount of energy and we power up those critical circuits, there's no extra power to be rotating through the city. What we need to do is we need to take those critical functions and take them off the wider circuit so that with a small amount of the power that we get allocated, we can keep those critical functions going. And then the balance of the power we can actually rotate through our system. And we didn't have the capability to do that.
Well, it just
I read some
sounds like,
report that there was like no map that they could release saying which circuits you were on.
Say that again.
I think people wanted to know what circuits they were on, and they Austin Utility Center said there's no map of that. Really tell you what circuit you're on and why this one went down and that one didn't.
You know, they have a map of circuits, so I'm not sure, you know, they have the ability to know that. But obviously, when people were out in the field and they did have power, and part of areas would be on and part of areas wouldn't be on. Sometimes it was related to a circuit. Sometimes it was related to a tree that had fallen on a line, and you just had areas that were out. I mean, it was happening at the same time that vehicles couldn't move, and that work is really dangerous work because it's around power lines. So you send a crew out to work on a power line. If you accidentally start up a system or a circuit or an area while you have crews working on a part of it, people die. So it's just logistically a hard thing for them to manage. And any given house, if it was out, it was not necessarily true that they could have told you why. And frankly, in that moment, everybody has questions and everybody should get answers. But there are so few, the demands for people to actually be doing stuff is so great that it's hard to have people both answer questions and doing the work as they're running around doing the work. I mean, it was on so many levels, it was horrific all around.
oh, no, it certainly was a nightmare. And I know my first, I'm sitting here in my house and we had just built a new deck and pergola on the back of our house. So I'm looking out there at all this snow, and it took me back to why I came to Austin in the first place. I was sitting in my home in West Des Moines, Iowa, looking at my deck with 4 feet of snow on it. And I said, no, I'm not going to do this. So I called my realtor and I moved to Texas so I can sit on my kitchen and look at my deck with 4 feet of snow.
So we should all be blaming you, Sandra, for the snow that has arrived.
I think we should probably get started now, Mayor, if you would like to just tell us what's going on and what your thoughts and feelings are, okay?
And I appreciate that, Sandra. Mostly what I wanted to talk about was Proposition B, because I think that's the hard one on the ballot, and talk about homelessness in the city. And I'll talk just a little bit and then answer questions so that I make sure that I'm hitting what it is that you want me to hit. The first thing I'll say is that the fact that we have people tenting in our city is bad. No one wants people tenting in our city. And we can't ever get used to it or accept it or say we can live with it, because the answer is we can't and we should not. The question really is, what do you do about the people that are without homes in your community? Or what do you do with the people that have mental health challenges and our governments no longer have the infrastructure set up to help them in ways that used to exist? What do you do? When I came into office, the first couple years when I would go to neighborhood association meetings, I would always be talking about zoning issues and flooding issues. Other things too, but mostly those two things. And beginning in my third year in office, I was ending up in neighborhood associations more and more where the only thing people wanted to talk about was the homeless encampment that was somewhere near their neighborhood. And I'm talking about really, really angry neighborhood associations in different parts of the city. I remember being at Onion Creek Neighborhood Association, This was 2 years before the council took any kind of action. Angriest neighborhood association I've ever been in, including the ones that were dealing with the land development code a year or two later, because everybody there seemed to have a wife or a daughter that had an awkward or unfortunate encounter with someone they said lived in that underpass under Slaughter Lane at I-35. And they demanded of me as mayor that I fix that. I remember at the end of the meeting, one of the guys came up to me and said, "You're mayor, fix this. And if you don't fix this, I have a gun and I will fix this myself." Now, I don't know that they actually meant that, although I did point it out to some of the members of my detail just to know. But the emotion I understood. The problem is that I had nothing to offer that person. Right now, we could fence the underpass at Slaughter and I-35. Well, actually, we couldn't because it's not our land. But the state, if the state came in and fenced the underpass at Slaughter and I-35, they could fix that. There wouldn't be any camping under that underpass. The problem is that those people don't disappear. So they're going to get up and they're going to go somewhere else. And wherever they go to, there's going to be another neighborhood association that starts calling me to say there's an encampment in the woods or the streams down there where I live. These encampments had existed with virtually the same number of people that we entered COVID with. In other words, we haven't increased the number of people experiencing homelessness in our city in the last 6 years. We really haven't in the last 10 years. We've had basically a pretty consistent number. But those folks, when they're camping in places you don't see them, are living in conditions that are infinitely worse than the conditions that you see. We now see the encampments as filthy and as trashy as they appear. You're looking at encampments, other than here in COVID recently, that we had crews out on fairly regular basis. The real mistake I made in this whole thing, going back 4 years ago, was when I was first called out to one of those camp areas in the woods that somebody had found, because we didn't know where they all were. I mean, they're just in places. EMS begins to learn over time where they are because they get called out to them because someone is hurt or been injured. But I went out to one that hadn't been sanitized or anything done for years. I mean, imagine the camps you see if no one was there for years. And I walked out there and I could not believe that existed in Austin, Texas. I mean, it was worse than anything that I have seen in the pictures of Calcutta, India. It was horrible. And at that time, relatively new in office and not knowing, I pushed really hard to get it cleaned up and to get it fixed. And what I should have done was brought out the media first. And I didn't do that. And I didn't do that because I thought, my God, we just need to fix this. We don't need to broadcast this. That was a mistake. We should have broadcast that so that people had that as kind of their base knowledge. We had a policy that was pushing people to those places because we didn't have a better place for them to go. In and around 2016, our city wrote 18,000 tickets. 18,000 tickets to people that were without homes. As you might imagine, very few of those 18,000 people show up in court the following Thursday to pay their fine. When they don't show up to pay their fine, a bench warrant issues for their arrest. And when we finally get them in a place 6 months later, when they can move into an apartment or they're up for a job, they don't get it. They're disqualified because now they have a criminal record and an outstanding warrant. It just doesn't work. And then we started having more and more courts in the country that were saying you can't fine someone or put them in jail for not having a home if you don't have a place for them to go. And that's where this city is and has been. The officer gets a call from the business who says someone's experiencing homeless outside, scaring away my customers. Make this person leave. The police show up and say, if you don't leave, we're going to give you a ticket or put you in jail. She starts gathering up her stuff. She says, officer, please don't arrest me. Please don't give me a ticket. Look, I'm gathering my stuff up. I'll move. Where should I go? And the police officer says, ma'am, I don't know where you should go. I just know you can't be here. So you need to move along. So she picks up her stuff and she does. And wherever she goes, she is also still violating the law. We have to do better than that. So here we come up to Proposition B. And I will tell you that based on what all the data and my conversations in as many places as I try to go to, I think 75% of the people in our community would agree that Proposition B does nothing to help us. The only thing Proposition B does is it gives a fine and potential jail to someone experiencing homelessness. It offers no homes, it offers no support, it offers no treatment, it offers no anything. Literally, the only thing Proposition B does is authorize a fine and as we talked about, the potential jail time. It does nothing. There are a lot of people that are looking at that and say, okay, I hear that, but the status quo is worse because I just can't abide the tents that I see. 75% of the people in our city would rather have a third choice. They would rather say, I don't want to vote for Proposition B because in my heart, I know it is absolutely the wrong thing to do. It's inhumane. It does not help. At best, it's going to send people back to the woods and the streams. You know, I've had over a dozen women come to me when I go around the encampments now that come up to me and say, thank you, and please thank the city for letting me be here. And they start to describe what their lives were like before that, in the woods and in the streets. Because there are, if I extrapolate, who knows how many, but each of these women, part of their lives was getting assaulted on virtually a daily basis. It was just the cost of living. I mean, that is just what happened to them. And their only choice at that point is to endure that or to pick somebody as their protector in that space. Uh, and 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 they say, thank you for letting me be out because now I'm more visible. And that doesn't happen to me now. I don't have it in my heart to send any of those women back to that place. I just can't, I can't do it. But I also recognize that having people sleeping out in tents and where we see them is also not good. And policy, the status quo is not good and needs to be fixed. So the question is, what do we do? There have been two reasons why we haven't been able to move forward and do what we know needs to be done. Because we know what needs to be done. We know what works. Caritas gets someone in a home and gives them services. They are 95% successful. That person does not return back to the streets. I don't know what you do about poverty. I don't know what you do about the extreme differential in family wealth based on race. Homelessness, I know exactly what you do because we can point to it and we know what works. We were able to become one of the few cities in the country to achieve net effective zero veteran homelessness. Doesn't mean there aren't any homeless veterans. It just means that every homeless veteran we find, we can get into a home in 45 days and get them services within 2 weeks and get them stabilized and off our streets. We can do that. We know it works. We just have to scale that up to the whole city. We have now taken virtually every child on our that were on our streets off our streets. We have a little bit. If it wasn't for COVID, we would already have that task done. But we need to scale it and actually apply what we know. Two reasons why we haven't been able to do it. The first one is there's been this battle in the city going back since before I got elected mayor between some in the community that are mostly concerned with the aesthetics of homelessness and just getting people that are disruptive away, almost without regard. Right? Let's set up a campsite at the outskirts of town, and if we find them in town, let's move them out there. Let's just get them away because they're disruptive, and those people want to build, kind of emergency shelter. They don't want to invest the money in actually stabilizing lives because it's more expensive and it takes longer, and they want to deal with the immediacy of the challenge. And then we have another group of people that don't want to spend any money on emergency shelters or dealing with what is creating the political and practical issue we have right now of people seeing what they're seeing and having to interact with people that lack the behavioral health. They're unstable and they're scary and they're threatening, and sometimes they are, physically abusive. These people want to spend all their money on the permanent solutions, which are more expensive and take longer, and are not as inclined to spend money on the immediacy of what we see. And because we've had these two groups at odds with each other, we've never been able to move forward because we've never had the critical mass necessary to actually say, what is the plan? We could never agree as a city on what is the plan. How long is it going to take? What's the goal? What are the benchmarks along the way to measure progress? What is it going to cost? What is the time frame? We could never get there. The second thing is that if you had such a plan, it's not cheap because you're talking about actually housing people. The way you solve the challenge of homelessness is to put people in homes and give them services. It's not to hide them, but it's expensive. So we haven't had the resources or the will to really focus on this challenge. In the last 4 months, we have moved past those two challenges. Last week, there was a summit conclusion that was released to the community that had the Downtown Austin Alliance and the Chamber of Commerce locked arm in arm with Homes Not Handcuffed and the Austin Justice Coalition. Never before have they been in agreement. I've been on dozens and dozens of panels where they were on opposite sides of me arguing, but never before have they agreed on a plan. And they did this time, beginning with, they had a facilitated conversation back in November, kind of like a marriage counseling session. It was a facilitated conversation, business and these advocacy groups, to try to see if they could come up with a small trust building exercise that they could do together. And out of that conversation, I was invited to be part of it. Out of that conversation, it became apparent that we could actually agree on what the overall plan was. That announced last week to take 3,000 people off our streets into homes in 3 years. At that rate and that pace, that gets us 5 years to get to equilibrium, where we can actually have housing exits for 15,000 people. Because the initial costs are the hardest ones because you're building the capital system in addition to the emergency shelters. So for the very first time, we have a plan that we can actually take to funders and philanthropists and to the county and to others. This is a whole system. It has components, mobile loaves and fishes and community first, which I have always supported. Diane and I, we have contributed personally to each one of their phases. Foundation communities, a great component. But we're talking about what, 200 people, 220 people out of community first? And the number of people at community, at community first, and we need to scale that. I'm excited that they've announced a scale over 10 years to get additional 1,400 people. We need to move faster and bigger than that. And not everybody will go to community first. We need choices that will actually have people that they will go to so that they will stay, so that they can get the services, and as many of them as possible get back into life. We've never had the funds until the federal government and Biden started talking in November about a $2 trillion package. There's $200 million that's coming to the city of Austin, $240 million coming to Travis County. And what I have suggested to my colleagues is we have a once in a lifetime opportunity. We will never get this kind of capital infusion as we have right now. A year ago when we got COVID money, we had to spend it $1 million here, $2 million here, $1 million here, because we were putting tourniquets on open wounds. We had to keep people alive. We're in a different place now. This is money we should spend on something so that when we exit COVID, we exit based on uh, uh, a better, more just, more equitable city than we went into uh, COVID. And it's going to take everybody at the scale we're in. So the city and the government need to come in and fund this as part of the infrastructure that we provide to, as David asks, everyone should have a right to a home. And the government needs to lean in, but it's bigger than government. The philanthropists need to lean in, the foundations need to lean in. We're going to be presenting that summit plan that we presented to the community, to the city council on Tuesday. We presented it to a large group on Thursday. We're going to present it to more and more groups. And if you haven't seen it, reach out to me and I'll give you the PowerPoint that they used. But where there's going to be a big funders collaborative that we're going to be meeting with here in the next week or so. And then I think, I think that we have a delegation from the city that gets on a plane and we drive out to the headquarters of Apple and Google and Facebook on the West Coast, who are putting hundreds of millions of dollars into this challenge in those cities, and say, we are your second biggest city. And you need to be part of this community effort too, because it is within our grasp to do this. We had, in our last point in time count, 2,700 people on our streets on any given night. Over the course of the year, we have 8,000 people that intersect with our homelessness system, because someone can be experiencing homelessness not on January 1st, but yes, on March 31st. And by July, they're not anymore. So if you're going to count on any given day, you're not going to count everybody over the course of the year that experienced that situation. But 2,700 people on any given night. You know what the number is in Los Angeles? 43,000. Los Angeles County, 74,000 people. Seattle, smaller city than we are, has 6 times as many people on the streets experiencing homelessness and unsheltered. We have about an average number of people experiencing homelessness in our city. We are so far below San Francisco and Portland and LA and those other cities. When I sat down with Eric Garcia, who's the mayor of Los Angeles, and I said to him, I don't even know what you do in Los Angeles. The scale of the challenge is so great. They're spending $1 billion a year on housing and losing ground because they've never set up the system. You actually have to set up a system and move people through it. Most people who are experiencing homelessness don't do it because they have a behavioral challenge or a substance abuse challenge. They do it because they're the victims of a perfect storm. They're in a city where housing is expensive. Austin. They're in a city where housing is expensive. And then they have a medical bill. And it's more than what their family can afford. But that puts stress on them. So they don't know how to pay that. They're having to juggle things. And now the husband and wife are fighting over dollars because they're getting calls from these bill collectors on this medical thing. It's adding stress to their marriage. And then they start fighting. And then one of them loses their job. And now they can't pay for their car. So they lose the car. When they lose the car, they can't travel around. That puts more stress on their job. The next one loses their job. And the spouses separate, and the spouse is moved from and no longer with the children. And then they lose their apartment. And then they're on the street and they're alone. And there is no one for them to call. There is no social support. There's no backup. At that point, that person raises their hand and they say, can you help me get a house? Just a home for a month, 2 months. Let me get my stuff in order. Let me catch a breath. Just put me in a place where I can stabilize, where I'm not on the street, so I can actually focus on getting a job and that kind of stuff. If we can get that person into a home in the first month or 2 or 3 or 4, there's a really good chance that most of those people turn their lives around and get back in and get integrated. That happens in Austin, Texas right now, and you raise your hand and say, give me a home. Do you know how long it takes you to get a home? 1.5 years. We are making a significant part of the challenge of homelessness that we're dealing with because we're not dealing with it in a timely way to get people back. So we have within our, I sat down, as I told you, with Eric Garcia, mayor in LA. I went out to him and I said, I don't know what you do. You guys are sunk. But let me ask you a different question. What do you wish you had done 10 years ago? In hindsight, what could you have done 10 years ago to avoid being where you are today? I asked the same question to the mayors of Seattle and Portland and San Francisco. They each gave me the exact same answer. They said it is a priority in our community right now to house people because everybody is so upset with the tents they're sitting. It's become the political issue. It is the campaign issue in every race, at every level, in everything. It's like the issue. And we're finally putting money against it. I wish we had started doing that 10 years ago. Because if we had started doing it 10 years ago, we could have built the infrastructure while the number was down. We could have reached equilibrium and had a system that was operating. I wish we had done it then. I said, why didn't you do it then? And he said there was no community will to do it then. He said we were effectively hiding our challenge. No one saw it. And when they didn't see it, people weren't ready to put resources against it to fix it until it just burst at the seams, until it got so big you couldn't do it anymore. He said, fix it earlier. That's where we are. And then he turned to me and he said, what's your number in your last point in time count? I remember. And I said, 2,700. And the mayor of Los Angeles started laughing at me. And he said, make me mayor of Austin, Texas. I can fix homelessness. He said, with everything that's happening in Austin, you can house 2,700 people. You can set up a system that can deal with 10,000 people with all the wealth and business and opportunity. He says, you're stealing my companies right now. You guys can fix homelessness in your city if your community actually wants to do it. That's where we are. So I look at Proposition B and, regardless of what that vote is, the state's probably going to pass a statewide camping ban. And regardless of what happens on Proposition B or what the state does, what we need to do as a community is exactly the same. We need to take that plan that came out of the summit to house 3,000 people in 3 years. That has us, by the way, focusing immediately on encampments. It has 100 people being moved out of encampments by June. By August, it has another 200 being moved out. By December, it has 400 people being moved out. And people are going to see that movement in our city. So we need to execute that. My hope is that the city will put a big portion of the money coming from the federal government. My hope is that the county will contribute. My hope is that the main foundations will put their shoulder to it. My hope is that the businesses will put their shoulder to it the same way that the private community and philanthropists funded the Long Center. We should be funding the homelessness infrastructure in our city to reach an equilibrium place. I hope people vote against B. And I hope people vote against B because it doesn't do anything except add a criminal penalty. And I don't even know what we do when we have a criminal penalty, right? People are camping in our parks right now. It's against the law. And there's a criminal penalty for camping, for tenting in our parks. It's against the law. You can't be camping under our existing ordinances at Texas U-turns. It's unsafe to be that close to traffic. The problem is, it's not an enforcement issue. It's not a fine issue. I hope we don't vote for B because I don't want us to say that about ourselves. I want us to do better. Our solution as the city shouldn't be to hide homelessness, which is the only thing that happens with Proposition B. It gets hidden. We shouldn't be hiding people. We should be housing people. And I recognize that we have not presented to the community an alternative to the status quo. But we are now. And it's only because the stars have aligned. It hasn't been through lack of trying to get both sides to agree on something or to brainstorm as to where you could get the resources necessary to actually build out the infrastructure. But we have it now. It's a godsend. And we need to do that regardless. But in any event, with respect to Proposition B, there's a better way. I'd also point out that when you look at the polling, it's really close. This election is going to be really, really close. It's supported by Republicans 90-10. It's hard to find an issue in either party that is supported 90-10. But criminalizing homelessness is supported by Republicans 90-10. And that's why it's a close election. Democrats support no, but they don't support no at a 90-10 rate. If Democrats supported no at a 90-10 rate, it wouldn't be close because there's so many more Democrats in Austin. But that's why it's close. And my hope is that more and more people hear about what happened last week with the summit, and people hear about what's happening with the city council this week. And there are more and more conversations about putting the resources against it, and foundations step forward. And hopefully enough people will hear about that before the vote, and to say, okay, I'm not going to vote for it, because it's going to be really, really, it's going to be really, really close. But whatever, we have to do this work regardless. And it's the work we're going to do.
Yeah, if I can interrupt you there, I'd like to comment that even if this does pass, we can still continue the efforts and the work, to get the people off the street. It might be, an encumbrance, but it's not something that couldn't be overcome. The one question I have about all of this is that we don't mention anything about finding work for these people. And to me, I've always felt that, having a home is, of course, the number one priority, but you need to have something that makes you feel worthy. And a job of any kind, if you can accomplish anything, makes a person feel more worthy. And I think that should be a critical part of your plan, simply to make those people feel better about themselves and hopefully continue on the right path.
I think you're absolutely right, Sandra. And different people experiencing homelessness need different things. Many people just need a job. Some people need training for a job,
Yeah.
not a 2-year degree, a certificate. And some people need mental health intervention, some need substance use intervention. But this plan invests heavily in support services. A home without services doesn't work. Services without a home doesn't work. If you just go out and try to help people and provide them services to the people that are in the tents and under the overpasses, it's better than no services, but it's nowhere near as effective if you can get them out of that tent and into a home, because they're able to have an uptake that's so much greater. It's also interesting, Sandra, that we give money right now to Workforce Solutions, which is the kind of it's the designated entity in Austin that's in charge of receiving the federal workforce development dollars. And we've really changed, since I got elected, their focus on upskilling people and moving people out of poverty into living wage jobs in the focus. And they have, in the last 3 years, I think, helped 650 people that self-identified as experiencing homelessness. And they have gotten 65% of those people into jobs and into living wages and off the street. We need to scale that. So you're absolutely right. With that universe of people that we have that are experiencing homelessness or are about to fall into that place, or maybe they're that person who finds themselves on the street for the first time and a week or two raises their hand, we need to get them into a home with what it is that they need. And in some cases, we have women and their children that are experiencing homelessness. They need childcare so that she can do the services. So it means that she can do the job training or the job development. Whatever somebody needs, it's going to be less expensive for us to actually get them what they need to become sustaining than to deal with them otherwise. Do you know what it costs us in this community per person for the 250 people that are most chronically homeless? Per person, per year. Those 250 people are costing our community jail, emergency rooms, all those things. Each one of those people are costing our community $220,000 a year. We're spending $50 million a year as a community on those 250 people. And at the end of the year, they are no closer to being off the street than they were at the beginning of the year. We have done nothing but get them to the next year. And we can't sustain that. We have to do better than that, especially in a city like Austin that actually has the capacity to do this. And I believe in my heart, everybody has their own ethical framework. I really do believe that I will personally be judged. My community will be judged. We'll judge each other by how we treat and provide for those that are least fortunate among us. At the end of the day, that's how we get judged. That's how we should judge ourselves.
Absolutely. Now, you had two items that you wanted to address in particular. Do you want to take some questions on this particular issue
Sure.
or move on to the other one?
I'm happy to answer questions if people have whatever you want to do. Sandra, this is your program. I am here for you.
Okay, well, let's have some questions right now that you might have about dealing with homelessness. Emil?
Good morning. I have a very strong memory of reading an article over a decade ago where Salt Lake City had declared that the only way to address homelessness was to put people in homes, and they implemented something that resembles council houses. My question is, have you heard anything about how Salt Lake City is doing now, over a decade since they implemented that?
My understanding is that Salt Lake City is one of the cities that continues to do well. In fact, Houston is one of the cities that is doing well. They're about 10 years ahead of us because they actually started investing in infrastructure back then. You know, part of it is cultural and customized. You need lots of different kinds of things. As Salt Lake City, I should have some congregate housing facilities, and some people like that. I mean, there are people that will go out and live in community first and like the fact that there's communal showers and bathrooms and kitchens because it gets them out and helps them build community. Other people won't go there for exactly the same reason. So really it's about choice, you know, and it's having the capacity. In Austin right now, we just don't have the capacity. I mean, for the last 10 years, we just have not added any permanent supportive housing for people experiencing homelessness at that level. And it's only been with this new 10-1 council that we've ever started doing it again, but we're talking about a few hundred. And we need to put that on steroids and just build it out. But right now we're looking at every city. This is the facilitated conversation we just went through that came up with this plan was with someone who is helping cities across the country right now develop plans.
Okay, Idana, I believe you had a question.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, is this the HEAL, the HEAL initiative that was in the paper a few days ago?
That is part of it. The HEAL initiative was the council's initiative, independent of the summit, to say, let's actually put resources against focusing on 4 encampments that aren't healthy, you know, in a park, too close to traffic, next to a library. Let's close down 4 encampments. What does that look like? How does it how do we do that? And let's do that. And that's moving forward. The summit takes that and puts it on steroids. The summit says, let's not do 4, let's do 21. And let's actually start moving through this. But that means you're just not going in and dispersing people. It means you're going in and actually housing people. Initially, that's going to be done a lot with vouchers for landlords or for hotels, which is the only tool we used when we achieved success with veterans in the city. But it also has us helping to build more permanent apartment buildings and the like, and working with low-income developers to move forward, because over time, it's too expensive to do vouchers for apartments and hotels. Better to actually build the infrastructure and move people in. They can be there however long they need to be, and then they can move out, and you can move someone into that same spot. So HEAL is part of this, the same way Community First is part of this, or Foundation Communities is part of this. It's just finally having a system that is integrated, that works with itself. We have a system right now in our city. It just doesn't work. You know, the consultant that was helping us through this said that every system is perfectly designed for the outcome it achieves, which I love. When you think about that, every system is perfectly designed to achieve the outcome it achieves, or else it wouldn't achieve that outcome. So if you don't like the outcome we are achieving right now, you have to change the system. And that's what we need to do as a city. And that's what we're doing.
Quick question, and then Bridget has a question. When I was living in Austin, there were a lot of abandoned hotels around the St. John's, I-35, let's see, Anderson Lane. And I always wondered why we couldn't pick those up to use for our homeless.
We are looking at those and have two in that area. You don't want to create a district in the city that has all of the people that are formerly without homes. That's not healthy for the community, for the area, or for those people. So you really need to do this kind of thing around the city. And that's a hard thing to do, because everybody supports this except for the one that's going to be near where they live. And it's not that they don't like the concept or the idea. They do. They're real supportive. It's just that that particular location is too close to shopping, transit, house, a school, a church, whatever it is. I mean, there will always be a reason why any piece of property is the wrong piece of property. And at some point, we actually have to say, no piece of property is perfect. And we're going to put these kinds of things all around the city so that we're all putting our shoulder to the same wheel.
Yeah, it's like, get over it. Bridget, you have a question?
Thanks, Sandra, and thanks, Mayor. I wondered how we can get the state to step up and resume more of their responsibility for caring for the mentally ill. They've been shutting down beds and, from my perspective, shirking their duty. I think it's a constitutional duty to provide care and housing for mentally ill. And that is a significant part. I don't know the exact percentage. I hear different numbers, but it's definitely a part of our homeless population is people who have really serious mental health issues and are unhoused. And it continually frustrates me that the state, among its many failings, continues to turn folks who are mentally ill out on the streets. Is there anything we can do about it?
Well, Bridget, you run for governor and you have my vote. I'll just say that to start off with. And then thank you for everything that you and the Commissioner's Court are doing in this regard, because you are right now providing that mental health safety net. And the work that the Commissioner's Court helped lead on with the Sobriety Center has been just great work. And so thank you for everything that you guys are doing. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the state has just abdicated this. You know, when the governor, opens up, Camp Esperanza, or, gets involved in homelessness, there are so many things the state could be doing that would be so helpful. And it begins with mental health support. And there is so little of it. The challenges we're talking about here are really expensive and huge, at least for the initial years when you set up the system. And the state is contributing pennies to our community on this work. But from the county's perspective too, that we need to bring in that support so that you guys are not trying to do that alone. The city, I think, is going to be ready, Bridget, to put some of our federal money against this challenge that you guys have been having to deal with. You know, we solve this thing and we get the most critically and chronically homeless on our street off our streets. It's going to help with the number of people in your jails. I mean, it's a huge diversion program in so many ways. But you're absolutely right, Bridget. I wish there was more to do. I wish this legislature was more enlightened.
Wendy, did you have a question?
I did, ma'am. I wanted to know, can he talk about the myth? Because I'm tired. I hear this all the time from people. They're like, oh, the homeless are getting money for being on the streets. And I wanted to know if the mayor could help me, Mr. Mayor could help me with like a good counter argument for that. Thank you, sir.
The best argument for that is to just say simply it's not true, because it's just not true. But that doesn't work in today's world where what's true or not true doesn't seem to make any difference. But there are so many myths associated with this. They're not making money. If we do this well, we don't start increasing the number of people experiencing homelessness in our city. It's not like there's a voter's guide to cities for people experiencing homelessness when cities get stars and then they know where to move to. I mean, we have trouble getting some of the people in our community to move from one part of town to the other part of town, much less move across the country. It just doesn't happen that way. Now, that's anecdotally, you will always find instances and they will show up on the evening news. But big picture, those myths are just wrong.
Barbara, you got a question?
Well, actually a comment. And my comment is that it's going to be a small election. And I'm going to promise to get 5 people who normally would not vote in this election to the polls to vote against me.
Barbara, thank you. Boy, if everybody would do that, it's got to be a small number of people. So just a few thousand votes are going to decide this election.
Well, we will overcome. Okay, I have faith. Yeah, you wanted to address the other issue.
What was the other issue?
You just said there were 2. I don't recall. I know one I would like to hear your opinion on.
Okay.
That's the strong mayor.
So I haven't taken a public position on strong mayor, and I kind of resolved not to at the beginning of this because too many people think it's about me, and somehow or another it's hard to separate those two things. Obviously, it doesn't concern me because it wouldn't take effect until after I was out of office and I'm term limited, so somebody else will be there. So I just haven't taken a public position on that. I mean, there are cities that do that both ways. Houston has a strong mayor. Dallas has a system more like ours. So I haven't taken a position. I'm the other ballot measures that are up. Democracy dollars is something that ultimately we need to move to, either in this form or in a different form, to get more and more money out of elections. The vote to let us do elections in a rank order process is a really good thing to do. That really does enable the greatest number of people in the community to actually participate in an election. So I support that. There's a proposition to increase the number of districts from 10 to 11. They did that one in the event that the strong mayor passed, so the council would have an odd number of people. But by separating the issue, which is something I didn't want to do, but was outvoted by my colleagues, if strong mayor doesn't pass, we could end up with 12 people on the council, which means that everything that passes is going to require a supermajority in order to be able to win, because 6-6 vote is a tie. So you're going to actually need 7 and 5 against as the minimum to be able to pass anything. And I'm concerned about what that's why you always have governing bodies that most always have an odd number of people. I tried to get the council to agree just to enlarge the council in that situation to 13, if strong mayor doesn't pass and you want an extra district, add 2 more. But I was outvoted on that.
Okay, well, my personal opinion on the strong mayor is I don't like the word strong, and I think that's what's going to hurt this particular issue. I've lived in cities with city managers and with mayors, and I prefer the one with the mayor. I think a city manager is a waste of money, quite frankly. But, I got a whole lot of stories about, what can happen either way. But when they say strong mayor, that's going to turn some people off. And so that was just a wrong way to present that. Maybe it was intentional, I don't know. But is there anything further that you'd like to share with us?
I don't think so. Again, thank you for the work of that you guys do. Elections are going to get harder and harder here in the short term, not easier. And we really are fighting and battling over the soul of the state. My concern is that we're going to be fighting to an ever increasing degree over the soul of Travis County. You're going to see more and more money start coming in for Republican candidates and Republican races. So the work you guys do at the front lines is just critical work. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that. But I do want to say, after moving to Manor, and I am fully aware that Austin, even though I don't live there anymore, certainly influences the rest of the county and the state. So what happens in Austin is important to all of us, whether or not we can vote. And that's the one bad thing about it. I can't vote. It was a mistake. I think you need to bring in Manor as part of the Austin community.
Right.
Yeah. I'll manage. We can still work for Austin. That's for sure. But now we need to address our fire departments, which have something of interest to say too. Nick, would you like to take the lead on that and introduce your folks?
And Sandra, I'm going to go ahead and take off, but thank you so much for allowing me to join you here today.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. We love you. Okay.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Okay, Nick, it's all yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Perkins. I'm the Assistant Fire Chief with Travis County Emergency Service District Number 2, also known as the Pflugerville Fire Department. With me today is TCESD 2 Commissioner Rico Reyes. And then we also have some folks here representing the petitioners. I think Josh Stubblefield is here. He may have someone else with him that I'm not aware of, but that's who we have today. I have some operational things to review, and we're here to talk to you about the upcoming election for ESD 17, Proposition A, which will be on the ballot for certain members of Northeast Travis County, depending on where they live. And I will kick it off to Commissioner Reyes for some opening remarks and his comments on the matter. And then, like I said, I'll cover some operational details, and then we're happy to answer any questions and see what additional information you guys would like.
So thank you for having us, everybody. I'm here to serve as a factual resource for anybody who has any questions. I'm unsure of how familiar you are with this issue, so I'll sort of paint the broad strokes, and then I'll defer to Nick for any of the operational details, and then Josh and his crew will talk about the political side. I'm trying to stay focused on the facts and here to explain why we made the decisions that we did and the recommendations that we did. So to start off, I've been on been a commissioner for the past 5 years, and we've looked at this issue carefully for about 5 years. As both technology, processes and procedures, and demographics change, it became obvious that fire-based EMS was a wave of the future for many fire departments. And we looked at the structure of our finances and what we could provide our community. It became apparent to us that we were better suited to provide both services to our community for, we got more bang for our buck. Bottom line is we are in the community, we're embedded in the community, and it made sense, even though we are only legally obligated or statutorily obligated to provide fire services, we realized that with economies of scale and our people there, and now the market moving in a way that justified cross-training our individuals to also provide advanced life support, it just made sense instead of letting a private entity provide that and taking that profit for themselves. We saw an opportunity to take advantage of our community scales, the interest of our personnel, the interest of our community, and give that back to the community for incrementally smaller dollars more. So that's kind of the broad strokes of it. Travis County, I'm glad Bridget is on the line because she'll also be able to tell you her assessment at an appropriate time of what she thinks of the matter. But we've provided our finances both to the county and to every other city entity who's looked at this issue for years, which is why the city of Austin and Taylor and some of the surrounding communities all allow this to be on their ballot, all except for Pflugerville. So that's sort of the frame of it. I'll kind of be quiet for a moment, and then I'll let Josh talk about Nick. I'll pass it back to Nick to make any comments, and then we'll open it up to Josh to sort of let him explain his part of the initiative.
Thanks, Commissioner. I'll just share the service area and the map that we're talking about, what this proposed ESD 17 would cover. So if you see this area in the teal, this would be the new area to provide funding for EMS transport service. We currently serve this area. The red is all of ESD 2. And with the creation of ESD 17, this would be our primary area and focus to provide these services. One of the questions we get is, what happens to the rest of this area? As Commissioner Reyes said, Pflugerville made the decision not to participate in this, and there is an opportunity to work with them to provide these services and even to join ESD 17 in the future if it is created. So briefly, just wanted to show we have currently a fire station right here located in Wells Branch. That's our station 2. We have a station located here just on the outskirts of the city of Pflugerville, going into the unincorporated part of the county on Pflugerville Loop. And then we also have a station site here in Northtown over off of Wells Branch. And then we also have a station site located out at the training field and off of Cameron Road, or 973, sorry, that would allow us to get out to the eastern part of the area. So the funding that would be provided if ESD 17 was created would provide funding for at least 3 ambulances to serve this area. And we could probably also add a advanced life support squad to back those units up and assist them when necessary. I think that's really the operational kind of picture in a nutshell. If Josh is here, I think we'll turn it over to him for his comments. And then, like I said, we're happy to answer your questions and engage in conversation.
Thank you, Chief. Yes. So I'm going to introduce myself again for those that didn't hear me back when I first got on the call. My name is Josh Stubblefield. I'm the president of the Pflugerville Professional Firefighters Association. I also represent the petitioners for this matter for ESD 17. So just backing up just a little bit, adding on to both what Chief Perkins and Commissioner Reyes spoke to, a little bit more backstory. So this all started back in 2012, and even a little bit before that. But the fire department started noticing the shortfalls of response times with EMS, and where that was headed and where that was going. Brought it up back then, and fast forward in 2017, it was finally decided that the fire chief decided that the response times and the needs of the community were not being met by the previous provider of EMS services, so ambulance and advanced life support services. So that's the district decided to, well, basically what was happening is there were only 2 ambulances in our district. 50% of the time, they weren't even here. They would get sucked into the city of Austin. So we didn't even have an ambulance within our district at a flip of a coin. So there were very long response times of ambulances getting to needed patients. So we decided to, the fire department decided to start running ambulance service as well. So we stood up 2 ambulances, and we were going to work in conjunction with the previous provider, with our 2 and their 2. They pulled their ambulances out once we had once we stood up our 2 ambulances. So we were left holding the bag. So we basically stood up another 2 almost overnight, very quickly, to a total of 4 ambulances. And then over the last 4 years, we had another. So now we have a total of 5 ambulances operating within our district 24/7, and sometimes even able to have a 6th if staffing allows here or there if needed. Definitely, we stood up everything we could during the recent snowstorm. So, and with that, we were able to get our response times, and what I mean by response times is how quick that ambulance can get to that patient. We're able to meet these response times across the district with those the 5 units that we have, and meeting and exceeding all metrics set forth locally by the county, and then like national metrics and standards, which was not being met previous to us taking over EMS. So that gives you a little bit of a background of where we stand right now. But the issue that we're faced with, and this is the department was putting out this information, letting us know the information. So me as the leader of the association, I took all the information put forth, all the facts, and noticed, all right, well, the funding issue that we have here is we are operating both fire and EMS service out of a fire budget only. Okay, so that's obviously a huge issue. And then you add in the hindrance of Senate Bill 2, along with the exponential growth that we have in our community and our ever increasing call volume. That's not sustainable any longer, and moving into the future, it's not going to work. So we decided, what we'll do is we will petition to create ESD 17, and that's what we did last year. Is we got a petition with almost 5,000 signatures across the district, and put forth that to the county. We also let City of Pflugerville, they were involved. Everyone within the district is involved. All the cities and all the stakeholders within the district. City of Pflugerville decided they did not want to allow their citizens to vote on this matter, so they voted it down. Whatever their plan is moving forward with EMS, we don't know. That's ultimately up to them to decide. Yes, it is an option that they can then come back and work with us through a contract basis. Absolutely. And we've let them know that this entire time. If they chose to go forth with private EMS or whatever it may be, I'm not sure just yet on the route they're going to take. But the city of Austin did give consent to their ETJ, which is Wells Branch, Northtown, and then we have the area city of Taylor ETJ. So those are the areas that are going to be voting in here very soon, and ultimately by May 1st on ESD 17. And the county commissioners court allowed it to go to an election, a unanimous vote to allow it to go to an election. So that's where we're at right now. If this is voted in May 1st, what that will allow is it will allow all of those areas to sustain the EMS transport ambulance service that they have. and solidify that moving into the future. So that will give direct funding to those ambulance services that will ESD 17 will be directly for ambulances, whereas our current ESD, we're ESD number 2, will be for fire, and ESD 17 will be for ambulance service. So now we're taking, because we're funding everything out of a fire budget, and we're separating that to fire and EMS. Not to get too much in the weeds, but the way an ESD receives funding, it's already we're behind the curve with the funding that we are as an ESD because of the size department that we are. We serve almost 140,000 residents across the district, and once again providing both services. And with the growth that we have and the call volume that we have as a department, it's not meant. And an ESD was never meant to be the size that we are. It's kind of for a rural fire department, but here we are. And so this is the solution that we have come up with that will allow us to sustain the services that we provide to the district, to the citizens, to y'all, moving into the future with ESD 17 being voted in. That's a lot of information. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, I have one right now, okay? And I will tell you, I moved to Texas 7 years ago, and every year or every day nearly, I find out something new that I didn't know before, and this one is one of them. Are you telling me that across the board, fire stations do not have EMS as part of their program or support? It's all separate and private?
So a lot of big cities will run. They do what's called fire-based EMS, which is what we're doing. So the fire department handles the EMS as well, and they run like Dallas, San Antonio, Houston. Austin does not. Austin chooses to have a separate third party, basically. So you have AFD, which is Austin Fire Department, but then you have Austin Travis County EMS. So 2 different agencies providing those services. So that's another thing that, just to add on to that question, is another reason why fire-based EMS is very efficient, is because you have one person that's dual certified. So you have this person is also not only a firefighter, but they're also a paramedic. So you get two certifications with one person, basically. And that's why we can have the efficiency that we do. But to answer your question, some do and some don't. Once you get out into more rural areas, that's where you can see some of the private EMS, like AMR, Acadian, things like that. We have none of them in Travis County, though.
Well, my concern, I understand your concern is budget and funding, which is certainly valid. But my concern as a consumer is that the efficiency is in lack of response time. If you've got 2 different services, you have to notify that second service and then rely on them to show up. Whereas if you have total control of the fire and EMS in the same facility, then your response time is going to be much faster. And if I need an ambulance, I need it now, not 10, 15, 20 minutes later. Mm-hmm. And I come from Iowa, where there it is mandatory that the EMS and fire department are combined, so that every time an EMS goes out, a fire truck goes along, simply because they may need the manpower to lift or move or whatever. So that's just standard operating procedure. So I did not realize that Texas was different. And I'm sitting here in Manor, and now I'm wondering, do I even have a fire department? I don't know. And do I have an EMS available? I don't know. So that concerns me. And I think that your proposition is certainly valid and certainly should be voted for. And this whole meeting will be broadcast on Facebook, so anybody from everywhere can see it. and hopefully they will pay attention and you can get the votes you need. And as I said, I am concerned. Additionally, it's been my experience that if an EMS in one district is needed in another, it's a whole lot easier for that fire department to send that ambulance out where it's needed. So even though I may not be in your district, but I may in some time in the future have need for your services. And that's entirely possible that could happen. So it's not just like Austin. What happens in Austin affects Manor, just like what happens in your fire department is going to affect me as well. And I want everybody else to know that that is a universal problem, not just for your district and Pflugerville, by the way, has to be complete idiots running that city right now. I need to talk to them. Okay. So does anybody else have any other questions for Josh or Nick or Rico?
Sandra, this is Commissioner
Yes,
Shea.
please.
Yeah,
Please.
I just wanted to say real quickly, we've worked very closely with ESD2, the Pflugerville what's called the Pflugerville Fire Department, and they have, as Josh was explaining, provided the EMS service along with their fire service for as long as I've known them, and they've done an excellent job with it. But they did their due diligence and their homework, and they brought the information that Josh was describing to the commissioner's court, that they don't have the revenue base to support the ambulance service that's needed in the area because it's been growing so much. And we felt that the voters should have a chance to have a say on this. And I will just say, this is, not to be critical of the Pflugerville City Council, but we really never got a good, clear answer as to why they didn't think their voters should have a chance to have a say. You might disagree with it, but why deny your voters the opportunity to have a say? So I feel really strongly that that's an important right to allow people to have. We voted unanimously to call the election at the commissioner's court, because that's one of our responsibilities, one of our roles. And I support the ESD 17 overlay. So I just want to encourage people to vote for it. It's not a significant cost increase, but it will result in a significant expansion and reach of their services, and it will make them sustainable.
Well, that's the important thing too, is that not only will you have, I feel, greater service, greater response time, but it will be sustainable, and that's critical. So yes, I would encourage everybody who is able to vote for it. And as far as the Pflugerville City Council, I understand there's been some changes to that city council, and perhaps we need to make some changes again, because the council now seems to determine that the people don't need to make a decision, they can make them for them. And this is something that is not acceptable. Kathy, did you have a question?
Yes, as regards the rich people out at the lake who don't want to be part of Austin anymore because they're not receiving the services they believe they should get, I think that we should be able to prohibit any fire or medical services going to them if they do not want to pay into the tax base. Is there any way that we could arrange that? We should not allow the EMS that we pay for to go out there. We should not allow the fire service that we pay for to go out there.
Kathy, this is Commissioner Shea again. It sounds like Barbara's grandchild is on the phone. But we did talk with, through our governmental relations staff at the county, with the sponsor of that bill, to try and include a provision that would basically not allow the burden of services to fall on the county beyond the very limited ability that we have. Under state law, basically the county has to provide a road and a jail and a court, as somebody said. So I think there's going to be a really surprising wake-up call for the very wealthy and I would say fairly demanding population that lives out there that's accustomed to a lot of services, they're just not going to get them from the county because we don't have the money, we don't have the staff, and we don't have the legal jurisdiction or responsibility to provide it. But you're right. I think they're going to continue to demand a high level of service, and I'm pretty certain they're not going to be happy with the answer from the county, which is A, we don't have the money, B, we don't have the responsibility to provide those services, and we don't. So it's not good governance to allow wealthy areas to pick and choose which jurisdictions they want to pay taxes to. But we all know they're going to continue to demand the services.
Yeah, and there seems to be something wrong with a program that allows them to do that. And gotta say, picking and choosing who you're going to pay, no, I don't think so. But anyway,
Well, I would love to see their houses burned to the ground.
no,
If they're
Kathy,
gonna
that's not
remove
the way to win friends and influence people.
I don't care, Sandra. I'm sick to death of rich people getting away with everything. We pay for everything and they don't pay for nothing. And it's time that we just allow them to burn down or die of whatever ailments they have. That's the way I feel. Thank you.
Okay. David, did you have a comment you want to share?
This, I was just commenting in the chat that what you're seeing here and kind of what's different from what you saw in Iowa is that everything is funded separately and decentralized. And that's Texas. So that,
Yeah, I'm learning more and more that
yeah, I mean, so schools have separate funding, community colleges are separate, utilities have separate MUDs you've heard about, library districts, emergency services districts, and
do you know that is so much more expensive?
It's a ridiculous system, and this is how Texas has been structured.
But anyway, let's
so
get back to,
I think this district is a good idea for the people there in a fast-growing community that need more emergency services. But the larger structural problem is how decentralized everything is, and how and this is why your property taxes go up. With addition Central Health District and all of these other districts that get added on with additional little pieces of funding for different things in a crazy cloth of districts that nobody understands.
right, and I think that probably would take a legislative move to change that. But let's get back.
It would take a lot of legislative moves.
Yeah, let's get back to Nick and see if we've got further comments and questions there.
I think really we've covered everything. One thing that I did leave off of my slide was, or I didn't get to my slide, was just to give you an idea of what type of tax we're talking about. Our current analysis shows about 6 cents is what we would need for this area. So for a house on the rolls for $300,000, we're looking at about $15 a month to provide that funding. So I did want to make sure you were all aware of that. And that's really all I had for you. So Commissioner Reyes, unless you had anything, or the petitioners, that's really, I think, all we have.
Just a couple of comments. One, thank you, Commissioner Shea, for being so involved. And Commissioner Trevelyan, who's not online right now, has also been very involved with us as well. And so our thanks go out to both of them for also taking a close look at the numbers and being frank and sincere with what they can do and what they can't. She made an excellent point early on. It wasn't a vote for or against this particular idea. It was, in fact, a vote to let the people decide. And that's important. Sandra, to your point, one of the reasons why we believe we're absolutely the best choice, especially in this particular election, is we're ISO rated 1, and we're in the top 1% of fire departments, period, especially of this size. So given the efficiencies that you pointed out, given our top 1% rating, it's hard for me to see another choice existing out there. I'm happy to answer questions here, or I see that we're nearing the end of our time anyway, but if anybody wants to reach out to me personally, I see a lot of familiar faces. I've been involved in politics in services and public services for a long time. So if anybody wants to talk to me personally, I'm happy to do that.
Will do.
Yes.
Thank you all very much for having us.
Well, we want to make sure we get all of our facts because this will be broadcast on our Facebook page and our webpage as well. So we want to get as much information out there for everyone to see as we can. We have one more guest to speak, Marc Garcia, who is running for Pflugerville ISD. Is that it? I'm sorry, Marc, I've forgotten.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. You go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us why you want to be on that board.
Thanks. I appreciate it. What time is it? Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marc Garcia, and again, I am running for Pflugerville ISD School Board, place number 1. And I'm running as a Democrat, but I'm also running as a father, a current educator, who really wants to bring a unique voice to the board. I think that sometimes, that's what's missing, right? Is somebody who has kids. I've got 2 elementary school aged kids right now. And so I'm really invested in making sure that we set the right path for them. But I'm also an educator right now, not a retired educator or not someone who, understands the school system, but rather somebody who is in the school system right now. I'm a counselor in Austin ISD, but I also have been an assistant principal and a teacher in the past. And so, as somebody who has children, I really understand what a lot of our parents have been through over the last year, kind of having to balance virtual learning, having to balance my own career, right? And then running a household. And so those are the kinds of things that I think that, that we need on the board. Somebody who went through it with all the rest of our parents. And then as an educator, I understand really the anxieties and the stresses that our educators have faced over the last year because I was right there with them. I understand what education is like right now in our classrooms because that's my world. That's the world that I report to every single day at work. And so I'm really looking to bring that unique voice. I'm someone who understands as a former administrator what it takes to move schools academically. But more importantly, as a guidance counselor, I think it is so important that we begin to discuss the ramifications of the pandemic and what that has done and will do to our students as they return back into the classroom in the fall. We haven't begun to understand how this is going to affect them. Right now, we have small amounts of kids reporting back to our campuses. But unless we begin talking and unless the mental health piece becomes a priority, our kids are really going to be the ones who suffer when they come back into the classroom. And so I think that's a conversation that I'm ready to have because we need to have it now. In this moment, right now, as we kind of begin, really, I hope, to kind of curtail the pandemic. This is who we need right now on our board. And that's something that I'd like to bring. I'm someone, what we're seeing in the news here in Pflugerville, right, is that, just like a lot of other school districts, we're being faced with a budgetary crisis, right? And so as someone who has really stretched out our dollars, right, the last thing that we need to be telling our teachers is that we're going to pile one more thing on you, right? That we're going to expect more from you. That, quite honestly, you're going to have to do more with less. Our teachers have really been through it over the last year, right? And so to say something like that at a board meeting, I think is really putting undue burden on our teachers. It's been tough for all of us, but particularly our teachers who, in the midst of the pandemic, still showed up every day, still taught our kiddos, and no matter what, still showed up and did it with a smile because their heart is in this job. And so that's why I'm running. I'm running to be that unique voice on our board right now when we need that, more than ever. And so I'm addressing you guys today. I know some of you may live in Pflugerville ISD, some of you may not, but you might know somebody who does, right? As the only Democrat that's running in the race, I'm looking for people to please help get my name out there, and hopefully, kind of change the face of our board a little bit.
Did you turn that kettle off? She's about to switch to me.
So if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer. If you'd like more information, certainly marc4pfisd.com is my web address, or facebook.com/marc4pfisd. So I appreciate it. Thank you all
And
so
I
much.
know that they're having a phone bank, I believe this week, is it for you, Marc, in Pflugerville?
So we just did the phone bank this past Thursday, but we've got a couple of other events. So today we were out doing some lit drops. We're doing that today, tomorrow, and then certainly next weekend as well, as we approach our May 1st election date. And as you know, I'm sure early voting starts on Monday. So.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that. I was thinking it was this week, and maybe somebody could help you. But anyway, if you want to help Marc, these things are available for you to do. I've got two more things I need to have you listen to. One of them is Laurie Eiserloh is running for a new judge position, and then we have Andrew Allison, who is here to speak on the strong mayor issue. So Laurie, if you will take a short minute to talk to your new campaign, and then we'll go to Andrew. You okay?
Thank you, Sandra. I'll keep it really quick. NETCo Dems, you're the first to know. Newsflash. I announced this week, woohoo, that I am running for the new civil district bench, the 455th. It was created by the legislature last session. A Republican is on the bench now. The election is not until March of 2022. And it's a civil court, not a criminal district court. In case you want to know, our friend Kenan Wooten is not running for it. I did check with her before I threw my name in the ring. I don't have an opponent right now. But I do have almost 500 supporters, which is a great deal, including Celia Israel, Gina Hinojosa, Mayor Adler, most of our all of our commissioners. So a number of our city council members, and a number of you all too. So thank you for your support. You all, there's civil district court. We're hearing family law cases, employment law, any kind of case and like that. I'm almost a 30-year frontline trial attorney. And what I'd like to bring to that courtroom is dignity and respect for all the litigants, no matter who they are. We don't need our courts to be a bunch of elitists. We need to be there for you, the people, to access them. And I also want to open the line of communications between the civil courts and the criminal courts, because sometimes people have a civil case pending and we, the civil judges, need to know what's happening in that criminal case so that we can make sure that justice is done and that we're not actually causing more harm than good. So again, Laurie Eiserloh, running for the 455th New Civil District Court, put my 30 years of frontline trial experience to work for you. Thank you.
Okay, Laurie, and I'm sure you'll be speaking to us in the future as well. So Andrew, sorry it put you so far behind, but please tell us about the strong mayor.
Of course. Thank you very much, Sandra. Thanks everyone for having me here at this meeting. I'll be brief to explain what these propositions on the Austin ballot are all about, and then I'd be happy to take any questions with any time that we have. I'm from the Austinites for Progressive Reform campaign, and we are a campaign to make Austin the most pro-democracy city in the country. We have a series of charter amendments that all have the effect of making Austin's local government more representative, more responsive, more diverse, and more accountable to the people that it serves. We got started last year for two reasons. And one is, as we all know, Austin is in the midst of a number of large and simultaneous challenges right now. And we believe that we are only going to be able to address those challenges comprehensively and equitably if we have democratic structures where everybody is represented and everyone's voice is heard. And the other reason we got started is because we are in this new era of voter suppression in this country, with new barriers to the right to vote that are going up all the time. And we know that the state is not our friend on this issue. We know that the federal government is trying to pass democracy reforms, but we don't know what's going to happen there. What we do know is that cities can act right now. And if we do everything in our power in Austin to increase voter turnout, increase representation, we can hopefully inspire other cities across Texas to do the same thing. And Texas is an urban state. We can change the election landscape in Texas just by the cities doing what they do, what they can do to increase turnout. There are 100 local leaders who have come together on this campaign, and they're available on our website, the whole list, on austinprogress.org. I'll put it in the chat. But it's people like Nelson Linder, the 20-year president of the Austin NAACP, folks like Robbie Osley, folks like Martha Cotera, and many, many more who have come together to support democracy reform in Austin. I'll quickly cover what the 5 propositions are on the ballot that we are responsible for. One is Proposition D, and that would move the mayor's election from the midterm years to the presidential years, when our turnout is highest and most diverse. It would allow our city's highest elected official to be chosen by our city's largest and most diverse electorate. Proposition E would allow us to use ranked choice voting for city elections, council and mayor. And this would allow us to not spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on costs for runoff elections in December, and it would make sure that everybody can participate in those decisive elections, because the November electorate would be the one choosing who wins. It's an electorate that is 60 or 70% of registered voters, as opposed to the December electorate, which can be as low as 11%. Proposition G, I'll skip Proposition F, which is strong mayor, and I'll come back to it because that's gotten a lot of attention. Proposition G would add a council district, like Mayor Adler was saying, and that was one that the council put on the ballot. It was originally part of the Strong Mayor initiative, and that would be useful in its own right, because we obviously are growing as a city. And if we do nothing, then by 2030, our council districts will have 30% larger populations. And that means less of a voice for neighborhoods and for communities and for grassroots voices. And Proposition H, which the mayor talked about, it was great to hear his perspective on it, is a campaign finance reform called Democracy Dollars, which would provide a $25 voucher to every voter in the city that they could donate to campaigns. And this is a way of diversifying the candidate pool and the donor pool. Right now, 1% of all Austinites give to campaigns, and 70% of those dollars come from districts 8, 9, and 10 in Austin. So this is a way to make sure that all Austin districts and all Austin voters can participate in the process of who funds campaigns, and it goes right at the problem of big money in politics. And then Proposition F is the one about the form of government. And this would allow voters and not politicians to choose the person who leads our city government. We are one of the few large cities in the country where an unelected city manager still oversees the city. And that includes drafting the budget, that includes overseeing the police, overseeing transportation and planning, and so many other city services. And instead, we could have a system with voters in charge, with a structure that's very familiar to all of us. We would have 2 co-equal branches of government, a legislature, which is the council, an executive branch, which would be the mayor. They would be independent of each other. They would have separation of powers. No branch would be superior to the other, and they'd have checks and balances between the 2. And very critically, they would both be democratically accountable to the people. And that is the real difference between the system that we have in Austin and the system that we could have, which is that voters would be in charge of choosing this person. All of these reforms have a few things in common. They've all been tested and proven elsewhere. So they are new to Austin, but not new in general. There's a lot of data and analysis that supports why they would be good ideas for our democracy. And that's all available on our website. I'll put the link in the chat. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about all of these reforms. And I would be happy to take any questions that you all have. Thank you.
Okay, David, I think you had some comments you wanted to make.
Well, I just wanted to respond a bit to what Andrew was saying. There's a very hot debate over Proposition F here in the city. And there are a lot of people that are very uncomfortable with increasing the power of the mayor, and particularly with the mayor having a veto power that would be very hard for the council to overturn, and are just really concerned that that this will make it easier for a conservative mayor to get elected and block a lot of the progressive efforts that have been made by the 10-1 city council. I wanted to mention that numerous Democratic clubs have already voted against this proposition. Most of the environmental groups in town, like the Sierra Club, are against it. All the labor unions at the Central Labor Council came out against it. So there's a lot of concern about the process that went into this, that this was done as a private process during a pandemic with relatively little public input into it. I should mention that almost every member of the city council has come out publicly against this. Almost all, I don't have the full list in front of me, but most of the Democratic members of the council, like Greg and Leslie Poole and Vanessa Fuentes and Pio and Natasha Harper Madison. I mean, they're all coming out against.
As I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about the strong mayor, it's the term strong and the fact that they have added that in there. Andrew, is there any way you could explain how that would not create a dictator in our mayoral position?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And I also hate the term strong mayor. I think it's an unfortunate characterization of what this forum is. Really, it's the same form that we see at the federal level or the state level. It just brought to the city level, so we can elect the executive of the city. David, it's good to see you. And David brought up some opposition to the reforms. And so the veto power gets mentioned a fair amount. The veto power would be one of the checks and balances that are in the system. It's important to mention that the veto would be able to be overridden by a 2/3 majority of the council. So the council would have the final say on all legislation and on the budget. Every big city in the country that has this system, and 2/3 of the big cities do, every of those big cities has a veto power, and our council takes 2/3 votes all the time. So ultimately, the council is still in the driver's seat on legislation, and the mayor has no say over what legislation comes before the council. And then in terms of concentration of power, I would just add that right now, power is concentrated in the hands of one person. It's that person is the city manager, and they are the chief executive of our city, and they're not elected by us. So the question that we're facing with Proposition F is not the creation of new powers. It is that who should wield the powers that already exist? Should it be someone who we do not elect, or someone that we get to choose? And I'll just finally close. I posted information about our process in the chat. We followed the same process that brought 10-1 district representation to the city. We followed the same process that brought our campaign contribution limits to the city. There are two ways to amend the city charter. One is to go through a city commission, and the other is to bring a petition. And so we brought a petition, but I will add that more people participated in our meetings to get public feedback before we finalized these propositions than participated in both of the last two city-run charter processes combined. So we took the idea of an open process very seriously, and folks can read more about it at the link I posted in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you,
Andrew. I've heard you say that over and over, but an awful lot of people were not engaged in this process that was going on during the pandemic and the presidential election campaign, and felt very left out. Many of the people that were engaged in your original process, like Chaz Moore and Selena Z, have come out against your Proposition F and against the strong mayor, because, as I said, I'd be very curious why you think all the environmental groups and the labor groups and the Democratic clubs are coming out against this, because I mean, that represents pretty much all most of the progressives in town who don't think that your proposals are progressive. They think that
well, David, I have to interrupt you. This club has not presented a position at all. And as far as people getting bent out of shape because they weren't initially involved, I think that's carrying things a bit too far. But anyway, Barbara Rush has a comment or question, so let's hear from Barbara.
Hi, I apologize in advance. I'm in my car with my 4-year-old grandson. So I just want to say on Prop F, I want to make real clear what, and there's a number of people that were on their website on the steering committee that have pulled their name off and are still listed. I want to say that on the Prop F, on the veto, it's really important to understand what it is, not just a veto, but the mayor would be allowed to do political appointments for all of the department heads. The mayor can veto he controls the budget. He will also have veto power over anything the city council does. I think that's really important to understand. And there's a lot of things, SOS and many other things, that pass by simple majority. If something were to pass by simple majority, the mayor could veto it. The only way they could override his veto is to come back within 45 days and get a supermajority. That means they have to come back and find 2 more votes that they didn't have in the first place. Workers' rights, so many things, civil rights, the human rights commission that was passed many years ago back in the 60s, all passed by simple majority. The mayor would have veto power over every single thing. And I personally, I think it's very dangerous. The social justice folks have come out against it, Kathy Mitchell and so many others. And it is, and I just want to say, Andrew, I like you, but I think you need to be transparent and tell people how much money you have given to this campaign. You and your family are over $250,000, and you personally about 150 or more. I haven't seen the last CNE. And I have to wonder about that. So I was at city council. I was with Laura Morrison. I'm currently chief of staff for Bridget Shea. And I know how the city works. And this is a very, very dangerous, slippery slope. And there is a reason every labor group, every environmental group, Sierra Club, Clean Water Action, et cetera, are against this. It's very dangerous to put that much power in one person's hand. And the mayor's race, Adler spent $1 million. Those are the people that have been serving as our mayor. We need to, it's rich white men that have primarily been our mayor through the years. And I think we need to understand where that a lot of power will be put in that person's hand, and the city council will be limited.
Assuming that everything you say is valid, there's still the question that a city manager is a single power that is not elected. That's the biggest problem, in my opinion, right there. Andrew,
the manager can be fired by the council.
The city manager is hired and fired by the council, and Andrew will say, "Oh, well, they've never been fired." I can tell you, many city managers were forced out. They may not have been fired. They were let go before they were forced out. And Commissioner Shea can tell you that, because she was a council member in the 90s and has seen that happen as well. So, to say it's not like he's hired and fired by the city council, who is elected by us.
Andrew, final comments, please.
Sure. Thank you very much. Just a couple of final comments. I would say that we should have more faith in our voters to choose the mayor that is going to be a good fit for our values. The mayor, if he were a council member and you measured his district, would be in one of the most diverse districts racially and economically in the city. We propose having our elections for mayor in presidential years when the turnout is highest, especially among Democrats. And that's Proposition D as in Delta. And so we believe that we should trust voters and trust voters to choose somebody who fits with our ideals. We have a council that can hire or fire the manager, But I will point out, as Barbara previewed, that the manager has not been fired in 66 years. We've had 17 different mayors since then, and there's a big difference between getting your council member on the record about whether they support the manager or not, or having some backroom forced retirement thing where it's not the same thing as a termination, and we don't have the same leverage over our city council members. And even right now, we only elect 2 of the 11 people, each of us, on the council. We elect our council member and the mayor. It takes 6 votes to remove a manager. And our votes are only in our district, but the money in the system can go to any district. And so the money has a big say right now in terms of city policy. And we believe that we should be able to elect the mayor so that our votes can have an equal say with the mayor. So I think this comes down to ultimately whether or not you trust voters to make the right decision for mayor. And certainly voters can get it wrong. But ultimately, the answer to voters getting it wrong is not taking that right away from them. The answer ought to be strengthening our democracy, turning out more people to vote, and making sure that we're able to elect people who fit our values. We went through a process in the last 4 years where we had a bad executive, a terrible executive, the worst ever. But our answer to that was not to take the right to vote away from us and place that in the hands of the Senate or the Congress. The answer was to make sure that we fix our democracy. And even during this pandemic, we're seeing the Congress address our democracy with H.R. 1, and we believe that we're in an epidemic of voter suppression, and we cannot afford to wait to act to fight back on democracy.
Emil, I believe you had a question or comment.
I won't address the specifics of the arguments. I put all of my thoughts on this in an article on our webpage on netcodems.com in the news area. It's a private comment. It is not the comment of NETCo Dems, but it's there if anybody's interested. I do want to take that to segue into the fact that within a month we will should have a NETCo Dems forum up on our website that will allow any of the people who join the forum to also post their opinions on topics of interest like this one. So that's just a quick blurb to advertise the netcodems.com website that we've been putting a lot of work in. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. And we are running out of time. Barbara, I would like to give you further time, but what I would suggest is that you go to our website and voice your opinion in that blog, just like Emil did, and that way you can get equal time. It's www.netcodems.com. And I'd also recommend all of you others to do the same. Check it out for information. It'll be getting greater expansion as time goes on, and we hope to use it to educate and inform people much further. But we are at our limit here, so I'm going to have to close the meeting. I thank you all for coming and for commenting, and this will be posted on our Facebook once Emil does some editing out cats and things like that.
It'll be posted on the website first.
Yes, and then Facebook too, so we can all see it. So thank you all for coming.
Thanks for having us.